Everything seemed normal on the flight until a flight attendant suddenly yelled at a young boy. The passengers were shocked, but no one could have predicted what would happen next. Just 10 minutes later, she was fired right in front of everyone. What went so wrong on that flight? Stay with us to find out. Before we start the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe for more. The airplane cabin buzzed with the usual pre-flight activity. Passengers were stowing their luggage, adjusting their seats, and chatting quietly. Among them was a young boy named Ethan, who sat next to his mother Rebecca. Ethan's eyes sparkled with excitement as he gazed out the window, his small hand gripping the armrest tightly. It was his first time on a plane, and he couldn't stop asking his mother questions. How does it fly, Mom? Will we touch the clouds? What do they feel like? Rebecca smiled warmly, answering his questions with the patience only a mother could have. She had saved for months to make this trip special for him, and she couldn't wait to see his reaction to their destination. Ethan, dressed neatly in his favorite dinosaur shirt and jeans, kept his backpack close. Inside were snacks, a drawing book, and a few toys he had carefully chosen for the journey. Rebecca, a single mother, wore a simple yet elegant blouse, her hair tied back neatly. Though she appeared calm, the weariness of long weeks of planning and saving showed in her eyes. This flight marked the start of a much-needed vacation. As Ethan leaned slightly into the aisle to get a better view of the cabin, a flight attendant named Karen Matthews walked briskly past. Karen, in her mid-40s, had a reputation for being no-nonsense. Her uniform was immaculate, her hair pulled back into a severe bun. She carried herself with an air of authority, her sharp eyes scanning the row for anything out of place. When she spotted Ethan leaning out, her expression hardened. "Sit back properly, young man," Karen said loudly, her voice sharp enough to draw the attention of nearby passengers. Ethan quickly pulled back, startled. His wide eyes were filled with confusion. Rebecca immediately intervened, her tone soft but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. He's just excited. It's his first time flying." Karen's stern gaze shifted to Rebecca. "This isn't a playground," she snapped, her tone cutting. Her voice carried enough volume for other passengers to hear, drawing murmurs of unease. Rebecca's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She placed a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. "It won't happen again," she said calmly, trying to de-escalate the situation. Karen's eyes lingered on them for a moment before she muttered something under her breath and walked away. An awkward silence followed in her wake. Ethan looked up at his mother, his earlier excitement replaced by sadness. "Did I do something wrong?" he whispered. Rebecca's heart sank at his question. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong," she assured him, her voice gentle. Unbeknownst to Karen, her behavior had not gone unnoticed. James Everett, a reserved but sharp executive with the airline, had been seated in first class. He was quietly reviewing documents on his tablet but had paused the moment he heard Karen's raised voice. His brow furrowed as he observed her demeanor and noted the reactions of the nearby passengers. Something about the interaction unsettled him, and he decided to intervene. James set his tablet aside and adjusted his tie before standing. His tall frame moved gracefully down the aisle, his expression calm but focused. When he reached the galley where Karen was arranging drinks, he cleared his throat. The sound startled her, and she turned abruptly. "Excuse me," James began, his tone polite but firm. "May I have a word with you about what just happened?" Karen blinked, her demeanor shifting to defensive. "Is there an issue, sir?" she asked, her tone lacking the confidence she displayed earlier. "Yes, there is," James replied, his voice low enough to avoid drawing too much attention. "I couldn't help but notice how you spoke to that child and his mother. It seemed unnecessary and unprofessional." Karen stiffened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Sir, I was just doing my job. Children need to follow the rules, especially during boarding. Safety comes first." James nodded slightly, his eyes narrowing. I understand the importance of safety, but treating passengers with respect is just as critical. That child wasn't disrupting anyone, and your tone was entirely out of line. Karen's cheek flushed faintly. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, I just... James interrupted, his tone firm but measured. Karen, I've worked in this industry long enough to recognize when actions are driven by something other than protocol. Ask yourself, would you have responded the same way if they looked different? Karen's face paled. I don't know what you're implying, she stammered, gripping her clipboard tightly. I'm not implying anything, James said, his expression stern. I'm asking you to think about it. For now, I'm requesting that you focus on your duties and avoid further interaction with that family. Understood? Karen nodded stiffly, unable to muster a response. James turned and walked back toward his seat. As he passed Rebecca and Ethan, he paused briefly. He gave Rebecca a small nod, silently assuring her she wasn't alone. Rebecca returned the nod cautiously, unsure of who he was, but grateful for the acknowledgement. Nearby passengers whispered among themselves, sensing something significant had just occurred. Karen returned to her duties, her movements stiffer than before. Her earlier confidence seemed to waver as she realized the man who confronted her wasn't an ordinary passenger. In first class, James discreetly sent a message to a colleague on the ground, requesting a report on Karen's history with the airline. He wasn't one to act impulsively, but he knew there was more to this situation than what he had witnessed. Minutes later, the plane took off smoothly, the cabin lights dimming slightly. Karen continued her tasks but avoided eye contact with passengers. Rebecca, meanwhile, tried to focus on calming Ethan, who had returned to his drawing pad. His earlier joy was replaced with quiet concentration as he sketched an airplane flying through the clouds. As the plane cruised at 30,000 feet, James received a reply to his inquiry. The report confirmed his suspicions. Karen had a history of passenger complaints, with several incidents involving unprofessional conduct. James's jaw tightened. This wasn't an isolated lapse in judgment, but a troubling pattern. During the descent, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been alerted to a matter involving our onboard service. I assure you it is being handled with the utmost seriousness. Thank you for your understanding. Passengers exchanged curious glances and whispered among themselves. Rebecca's unease grew as she realized the announcement likely referred to Karen. When the plane landed, the crew prepared for deplaning. James stood and approached Karen in the galley, where she stood stiffly, her face pale. Karen, James said quietly, please step aside to speak with me and the captain before disembarking. This matter requires immediate attention. Karen's throat tightened, but she managed to nod as passengers began to exit. She noticed the HR representative and security personnel waiting at the gate. Her stomach churned as she realized the gravity of the situation. In the administrative office, Karen sat in a starkly lit room as the HR representative outlined the complaints and evidence against her. The weight of her actions began to sink in. Meanwhile, Rebecca and Ethan walked through the terminal, finally feeling a sense of relief as they left the incident behind. For James, Rebecca, Ethan, and Karen, the events of that flight marked a turning point. Karen faced consequences she hadn't anticipated, while Rebecca and Ethan's dignity was upheld by a stranger's quiet intervention. For James, the incident became a catalyst for driving meaningful change within the airline's culture, a reminder that every passenger's experience matters.